Well, good evening and welcome to the latest instalment of Back of the Net, the AFC Bournemouth podcast. Outside, honestly, there were people with pans. They were smashing absolutely everything. Superb out there. Now, if you've not listened or watched before, we are live is the proof. There you go. Completely live. A bit of reflection there, but we want to make this a regular thing every single week, and for fans to get involved. There's only so many petty Instagram spats with Saints fans trying to create a rivalry that we can have realistically, aren't there? So we thought we'd do this every Thursday after the clap for carers, and we got a different panel of Cherries fans every week. This week there's going to be 4, maybe 5 people. Jeff's running late at the moment, so we'll connect with him as soon as we can. But first and foremost, it is Mr. Neil Dawson, famous from the Vitals Forum. Neil, how are you, mate?
I'm very good, Sam. How are you?
Not too bad. How's lockdown?
Lockdown's. I'll just come back in from having a good clap. And lockdowns treat me all right, so I'm getting a bit fed up with work conference calls, but I can spare you another conference call.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also someone who's been in the limelight somewhat, breaking some stories where he's been at the very forefront of what's going on. It's Mr. Peter Rutzler from The Athletic. Peter, how are you?
I'm not too bad, Sam. How are you?
Yeah, very good. How was the reaction for the clap for carers where you are?
It's fantastic, actually. It seems to be getting louder every week. I think my neighbour was playing with their wind chimes to add to it, as well as all the saucepans. So, no, it's lovely. It's a great gesture.
Excellent stuff. And also, just in the nick of time, hang on, Jeff, what's happened to your hair? I chatted to you earlier on and you had a Pat Sharp look, but what's going on now? You've gone, what's that? Well, you've been in prison with like Full Metal Jacket?
It's the lockdown. It's getting to me.
It's looking good. It's looking good though, Jeff. I've got to say, no. Like,
yeah,
really
cheers. I tell you what, no one messed with me in the park when I was walking the dog earlier.
Good man, good man. So how's everyone been then? Neil, has your job been affected by this, or have you been furloughed or anything, or are you managing to, keep
No, I'm working through, but I'm working from home, so. I had the unfortunate act of furloughing a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, but I'll be going through the duration. So I quite fancy being furloughed actually, but no, I'll be working.
Good stuff. And Peter, we spoke on a separate video on YouTube before, didn't we, about what on earth it must be like for a sports journalist in this current climate that we. I was on Talk Sport and. I mentioned this on one of my previous videos, and I thought I was going to be on there for a serious chat, but we ended up basically playing Connect 4 with Max Rushton and Barry Glendenning, and I thought, well, this is what it's come down to. And I don't know if you saw one of their memes they put on. They were ranking biscuits for tea dunking earlier. So what's it like for you? Yeah,
I mean, it's not as challenging as that. I mean, the guys at Talk Sport are doing a fantastic job in the circumstances, but yeah, it's different. You don't have the hook of a match every week. I'm lucky in a sense that we're not as reliant on those everyday news lines as everyone else is, which is good for football reporting. But it presents its new challenges, just trying to find different ways of telling new stories, old stories. So it's going okay so far. We'll see how it goes as it carries on. But yeah, no tea dunking stories as yet for our subscribers.
And Jeff, how have you been coping with the lack of football? It's not easy, is it?
No, it's not easy at all. I'm not liking it. The conversations I'm having are all about what's still going to happen with the Premier League season, and I think that's really interesting. What will actually happen? I can see it being a 47 game season starting in August at the moment. Currently.
It's very interesting because I think Neil's just dropped out there, but we'll get him back on ASAP. Obviously, at the start, when this whole outbreak happened, we were all sort of wondering what on earth's going on. But now we've seen the severity of the whole, COVID-19 outbreak. It's, football's taken a back seat and we haven't really been thinking about it. But at some point, it's going to be plateauing and we're going to be starting to wonder what's going to happen. And there have been numerous theories that have been going about, like voiding of the season and trying to delay it, like the Premier League have gone, playing it behind closed doors. Peter, what's your thought on what might happen? I mean, it's
so up in the
difficult.
air, isn't it? Yeah, it's a lot of speculation and a lot of what could be, what might not be. And I think one thing we can be relatively confident about for now is they're not keen on voiding the season just because of the financial implications of it, especially from a broadcasting perspective, the amount of money the clubs could lose, what the broadcasters could potentially want in return for not showing matches. But then it all gets very complicated around June 30th, and when contracts expire, obviously Bournemouth got several players whose contracts are up in the summer, and they're currently in a bit of limbo as well. So FIFA have just come out and said that they'll propose that they can extend it. That doesn't actually mean that those contracts will be extended indefinitely. Employment law supersedes that. So yeah, it's uncertain. I think for me, I think finishing the season is important. I think they've got to try and maintain the integrity of the competition as much as possible. I know some people have said behind closed doors loses that, but I think when you consider some of the options, whether it be points per game, ending the season, that doesn't. I think those lose more integrity than necessarily behind closed doors, which we don't want. And there are so many other things to consider with that. Of course, you've got to have an ambulance there at a game. You're gonna have, it's not just one or two people in the coaching staff. You need 100 odd people to run a game. So it's complicated, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, Neil, welcome back. What are your thoughts on, is it going to sacrifice the integrity if we're all playing matches behind closed doors? I'm not sure he can hear us, so we'll go for Jeff. What do you think about that? I mean, would it maybe? I mean, obviously we've played a number of teams, home and away already, but there are some matches that we have got left that are, winnable games. But then, it's more of a leveling factor when you've got sort of no. I mean, I know we've only got 11,000 or whatever, but. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, totally. I think the Dean Court, the Vitality crowd, is an extra man for us, and has been in those critical games, the must-win games that we had recently, Brighton, Villa. I mean, it was a factor in the Chelsea game. I don't think we'd have made that comeback unless the crowd had really got behind the players, or indeed held out for that 2-2, which was a really valuable point against a much better team on the day. So I think it will affect our performances, which won't be good, and I'm reluctant that they do play games behind closed doors. And to be honest, I think the whole timing thing, Peter mentioned the contracts, but what have the players been doing? You cannot be training at the moment, so it's effectively they're going to have to go through almost like a pre-season to get ready again to play, and you can only start training when the lockdown's been lifted, when social distancing has been alleviated. So that is going to be some time away, and if they don't loosen up the lockdown and that social distancing policy until, say, June or even worse, July, then you may as well run it as a start of next season. Starts with 9 games to finish this season.
Yeah, we're talking really fine margins there. Like, just as Jeff was saying, I mean, I think the EFL introduced a directive today saying that teams would need about 3-4 weeks to sort of get match fit, which is a significant amount of time if you're trying to get the season done in the summer or trying to avoid any damage to the following season. So it does leave the question, or could we potentially merge the seasons together? I think Leeds and West Brom might have a few things to say about that, but we're dealing with unknowns, and it's just that tight amount of time that they want to get it in. I think the EFL said it'll take about 56 days to complete their season, including the playoffs, which is, it's a lot of time in considering where we are now in April.
I was working out some kind of scenario in spreadsheets whereby I thought, well, maybe if it started in September, I think the Premier League and the EFL have both got 9 games to play, because we've played 29 matches, and in the EFL they're at 36 or something. So there's 9, but obviously they got the playoffs as well. But even if it was to kind of run on, could we perhaps maybe ditch a couple of tournaments like the FA Cup or the Carling Cup next year, or maybe even European football, play it out next season and just have a break, and then whoever qualifies then goes forward to the next. I don't know. There's got to be ways around this, and I'm sure they're going to be brainstorming. One of the thing I don't know how true this is, but someone mooted that we should be playing the games in China. Where I don't know where on earth I saw that, but surely that's just nonsensical, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one executive proposed that. I think that's one of the things Adam Crafton and David Ornstein reported on our site. They're just desperate to find a way to finish the season, just because of, as I was outlining before, the financial side of it. That's just, it's massive. As we know with Bournemouth and their tight financial structure and their reliance on the TV money, when you have big impacts like this, it's substantial, and then that doesn't look at relegation and things like that. So yeah, all options really. Some of them not very plausible or possible.
I think we could probably kiss goodbye to the Carabao Cup next season if that happens, and that's our most favourite chance of winning a cup competition. So it's the one we actually try to win. Bizarrely.
Just noticed a comment from I think this is Rob. He said, "Ditch the FA Cup, Sam." Well, we don't exactly perform great in it, do we? We're sort of in recent seasons we've been a sort of first round, although it is sort of getting better. But it's it's a really interesting scenario, and we're kind of sort of monitoring the news, wondering when can we feasibly talk about this with any sort of with any gravitas, because at the moment it's very much pie in the sky with regards to what on earth is going to happen. How have you been filling your time in terms of football, Jeff? For instance, last night, did you watch the thought it was a great thing that AFCB TV did by replaying the full 90 minutes? So we had West Ham first Premier League win, that 4-3, the famous Pew chop, etc. Did you watch that?
Yeah, I mean that was a game that I watched on my phone back in the day, so that was great to catch up on, frankly. And fantastic to see that again. Mark Pugh, those were the days. So I mean, I'm also catching up on a lot of stuff that I haven't actually been doing. All the books that I bought. So I read Neil Meldrum's book again recently, which was really good. And just catching up on some of the old stuff. It's great to take part in the Back of the Net World Cup competition. I think so. Call out for that. That was really good.
Yeah, you know what? I thought it's quite. I'm no Richard Osman or whatever, but I actually put a tweet out in November asking every person on Twitter to try to just basically submit their best 5 Premier League, the best strikes, and the plan was to do it at the end of the season. But obviously with what's happened, then we thought, why not run it out? And it was always going to be Matt Ritchie v Charlie Daniels. I don't even know why I bothered with I think it lasted about 20 days or something, but it was always going to be those strikes. And I mean, Peter, which of those was your favourite?
I think we talked about it before, didn't we, Sam? It was always going to be those two. So I do love Charlie Daniels' strike just because of just the trajectory. I think the camera angle when it's live really does help. But I think Daniels won, didn't he? So I actually feel that Matt Ritchie was a little bit unlucky, just because of the technique involved for that strike. He's chested it down on the volley coming across it. Not that I'm taking anything away from Charlie's hit, but the technique involved for Matt Ritchie's volley on the edge of the box, it's just something else. And to get it to top bins like that, it's stunning. I mean, 2 worthy finalists, definitely.
Yeah, were you Team Ritchie or Team Daniels, Jeff?
I was Team Gosling actually against Southampton. I thought that should have won it. What a goal! What a goal! And that was a team goal as well. So I'm all for team goals. But there you go. I actually voted for Charlie in the final just because I remember the elation of seeing that go in at the time, thinking, "Oh my God, he just scored against the best team in the world."
I actually presented. There we go. I actually presented Charlie with the was it the Goal of the Month trophy? Alex Deutsch asked me down to do it with him because one of his mates couldn't do it. But it was really good. And what a day for him that was, because I think it was his birthday. He just signed a new contract as well. And like Peter says, I think there's something about that goal that I really like. But the more I've watched the Ritchie goal, the more I've started to appreciate it, because it's something that he had in his mind when it was being knocked out. He had pressure on him from a defender. He chested it. He had to move his body and the shape of his body, and then to get it sort of almost on the outside of his instep, bending into that corner. Like I say, the only thing maybe it could have been more in the corner there. But I mean, what a goal that was. But yeah, like I say, the 4-3 in that West Ham match. Just watching it, like you forget some players were cool, calm and collected. Andrew Sermon and Union O'Kane in the middle, and Matt Ritchie's work ethic in that game. He got back at all times, didn't he, Jeff?
Well, Matt Ritchie, did we make a mistake offloading him to Newcastle? I mean, wouldn't he have been a great player to have in the squad this season, don't you think?
Yeah, quite possibly.
Just that voice in the dressing room, when it just makes such a difference. It's one of the things that, we probably mentioned a couple of times when their heads are down, just that extra voice. Obviously, Steve Cook's fantastic at that, and Nathan Ake's sort of grown into that role, hasn't he? But you need your elephant characters. You need your Matt Ritchies, and it's one of those you just wonder, don't you? You just wonder.
And I do think the best game that Matt Ritchie has actually played for Newcastle was that game last season when he scored against us. I don't see him to have been as good a player, as much of a threat as he was for us, and I just wish that the Matt Ritchie who scored in that game, had stuck with us. Really, he'd have been very useful this season.
Yeah, it's we've got a number of players that we've always had ones that have got natural connections with the fans. Like Steve Cook's one of them. Always turns to the crowd and tries to get them going. Fletch was always that type of player as well. But also you've got players that are not necessarily have the relationship with the crowd in terms of eye contact and geeing them up, but just leading by example. For instance, Jefferson Lerma, like Nathan Ake doesn't turn to the crowd that much, but it's just the fact that he's such a solid player. He rarely has a match that's less than an 8 out of 10. And it's these kind of players that, hopefully we'll be keeping hold of. And there's been a bit of transfer rumours over the last few days. I don't know, Peter, whether you can shed any light on this at all, but Ryan Fraser has been, mooted as perhaps being lined up by other clubs. Do you know any sort of more about this?
It's difficult with transfers at the moment just because of the state of play and what we were saying before about, with not knowing when the season ends, that makes things difficult. And just the financial realities at the moment, it's, there's talk about, if someone comes out and says, look, they're going to spend 60 million on a certain player, I mean, you just have to think twice about it now properly, where, clubs at the moment don't have any cash. That's the big thing. There's cash flow problems across the board. So that's one side of it. And I think when we look at the rumours that come out, a lot of them are to do with players leaving. There's nothing to say that they're concrete at the moment. But I think when you're looking at some players, you look at, say, Josh King or Callum Wilson, both 28, sort of in the prime of their careers now, that if they're going to get a big move, it would be now, really. And I think there'll have to be a sense of realism about what that could mean this summer, whether that's this summer. As again, it just depends on the market and how it work. Whether Bournemouth need to sell, that's another question. The financial impact of this will be big. I think they're not hiding away from that. There's the reason Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall and Neil Blake and Richard Hughes took a pay cut quite quickly. It's going to have an impact not just on Bournemouth but across the board. So that'll be interesting to follow. With Ryan Fraser, obviously his contract's up. So whatever happens next, we'll see. He's back.
Yeah, and like you say, there's been a lot of financial implications, not least the furloughing of staff, players all coming together with this Players Together campaign, which was sort of announced last night at 9:00. And Neil, can you hear us?
I can, yeah.
He's back. And we were talking earlier about some AFC Bournemouth fans contacting players directly via Twitter and tagging them in and asking what they should, basically saying what they should and shouldn't be doing. What's your opinion on that?
I've moved to the kitchen, so I'm near the router. So I'm
sure it's not because it's near the fridge, Neil. So
quick snack.
It's nothing to do with the fridge.
To do with that at all.
I think it always annoys me when people decide they're going to tell other people how to spend their money, because we live from people having zero money to having multi-billions and everything in between, and I just think who's got any right to tell Philip Billing how he spends his cash? I'm sure he does a lot of stuff like a lot of players do in terms of having foundations or training schools, etc. And I think the whole pandemic's kind of bred this thing where we all can tell people they can't do this, they can't do that, and we can all report on people. I think it's very, very strange. I think a lot of the calls for players to give up money, all that would have done would have saved a lot of Chinese, Arab and Russian billionaires from having to pay those players, and we're an awful lot better off if those players pay their wages and it goes into the tax system. If they choose to do something themselves, which I think they now have, that's great. But why there was this massive campaign to stop Russian billionaires from paying players money, I do not know, because the NHS didn't benefit from that. They lost from it.
That's right. And also there was some more financial implications for AFC Bournemouth, Peter, with a story that you broke, which caused a bit of uproar on Twitter. I mean, I was watching that tweet go out and the number of retweets that it was seemingly getting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that story and how it came about?
People do like to pile on, don't they? No, the story itself, I think it's just reflective of the times. Bournemouth then the next day, obviously, furloughed 50 members of staff who are not, they're not operational, they're front facing, customer facing, so in the shop, in the stadium, and topped up their wages. So, that's, and I don't really know the number on that, but then obviously that was coupled with Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall and Richard Hughes and Neil Blake taking a pay cut. My story evolved around the youth team accommodation providers who look after the young players in digs. All the young players had actually gone home. So that's important to say. So earlier last month, they'd gone home. Bournemouth then paid them to the end of the month. But then we're going to cease paying them. Part of the issue with it is that most of the players have left their stuff at digs. And the people that do look after the young players have been doing it for a long time. From the club's perspective, they're not using them at the moment. They are essentially suppliers. But then obviously from the youth team accommodation providers, it's a case of, we're all supporters. We don't make a lot of money out of it. It's about £500 to £600. And I think that adds up to about 10 to 15 grand roughly a month. So we're not talking about a major expenditure for people who do commit a lot of their lives to looking after these guys, to help them progress and, and see them move into the first team eventually. So, yeah, it wasn't a good story. It doesn't reflect very well. But I think, this is, with Bournemouth, there'll be more difficult decisions. I think we just were saying before, we know that the reality is there's no income coming in. Yeah. So they have to make these cost-cutting measures at the moment. And that might mean some tough choices. I fully expect, like we saw with Southampton today, the players will probably have to either take a deferral or a cut at some point. Those discussions will surely have to start soon based on the margins, unless there's some other income coming in that we currently don't know about. So, yeah, it's the story itself obviously it blows up because there's no other news at the moment, is there? So yeah, it's a lot. But it was an interesting debate for sure because
24 hours later they then redeemed themselves, though, didn't they? By bringing out a story that seemingly it was in the pipeline already. It was certainly not a reactionary story because it would have been very quick to organise something. But I think the next afternoon it came out that there were pay cuts for Eddie Howe, Jason Tindall, Neil Blake, Richard Hughes, maybe more. And that got a lot of praise. And the previous story just got swept under the carpet, somewhat. And, it was a very good, PR move, wasn't it? And that's actually a pay cut, isn't it, rather than a deferral? Because I noticed Saints in the news today said that Haas and Hootel and a number of their senior staff are getting deferred payments, part of their pay deferred, which, as far as what I can see, that just means they're going to get paid that a bit later on rather than now. So morally, maybe we've got one up on Saints by doing that.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely the difference between the two. That will come back. They'll have to pay at some point, and I think their owners have said, we'll make sure their staff don't need to be furloughed or anything like that. But yeah, in the case of what Eddie Howe did, which was then followed by Graham Potter at Brighton and the rest of the senior staff, it was a significant voluntary pay cut. The extent of that, I don't know, but it's a cut, which is very different. And I imagine they will hope to get something similar from the players too soon because of the way the margins are. But yeah, no, it was a positive PR move, especially after the negative that had come out the day before, for sure.
Jeff, I think a lot of players on Twitter, I mean, you can tell they're a little bit bored. They're posting more Instagram photos. They're posting a lot on Twitter. People are engaging like they wouldn't have before. Gary Chapman was tweeting Philip Billing, etc. Also, Steve Cook's getting involved in replying to tweets, and I love it, and it's great to have that sort of interaction. But I mean, if you were a player, would you be finding it hard right now trying to motivate yourself? Because I would really struggle.
I think it must be very difficult for them, and I'm pleased to see that they're engaging with the fans. I mean, we're an important part of the club, and it was interesting what Peter was saying just before, because I think one of the key points about supporting Bournemouth, being a Bournemouth fan, is this is a community club. It's built on a community vibe that is different to other Premier League clubs. So the news management is something that goes on with all the clubs, but I think with Bournemouth, you always feel that you want them to go the extra mile. You compare them to Southampton, you want Eddie to do that because he's part of the club. He understands where the club's come from, the difficult times we've been through, and the sacrifices that fans have made over the years. So it's important when the club gets the opportunity to do something like that they do it. And I'm pleased. And I just want the players to get even more involved with us, because it'd be great to have them on the show talking about stuff, how they're feeling, what they're doing. That would be fantastic. And hopefully the whole kind of relaxation of the club PR machine will enable them to be more vocal and get more involved like this.
Yeah, I know, because I've spoken to a couple of people at the club, obviously, rights holders for the Premier League, you're talking TalkSport, BBC, Sky Sports, BT Sport, Amazon Prime. People like us, is very difficult to get players involved because they may end up saying things. But you know what? We've got someone that's lined up for the podcast, haven't we, Jeff? An ex-player. Oh, should we tell him? Matty Holland's coming on, and it's going to be great to chat to him about his Bournemouth days and what a absolute rock he was at the time for us. So but it is nice to see that sort of extra engagement, and you see like fans sort of interacting with them, and then finally they're actually replying to messages, and it's just it's just a really nice thing. But one of the things that I think's been so nice is seeing those phone calls that Fletcher's making, Aaron Ramsdale's making. Neil, have you seen the one that Rambo made the other day?
Yeah, I saw Steve Cook's and Rambo's ones, and I think the thing that struck me as well is that, because I've seen some from other clubs, other players have done, but I don't know if it's because I'm biased, but I thought the ones that Steve Cook and Rambo did really sounded like people that genuinely actually wanted to speak to people rather than someone that was doing a PR stunt. And just through the length of the calls and the quality of the conversation, I thought they were excellent. So, and I'm sure the people that got them were genuinely surprised, and particularly the little lad. I mean, he was just gobsmacked, wasn't he? So it's wonderful. It's great that I think the thing with things like pandemics, they bring out the worst of humanity, but as we talked about earlier, but they also bring out the best of humanity, and I think that's a great example of it.
Yeah, I mean, the little lad that was crying on the phone to Rambo, he just couldn't believe it. And I like the little touches we've done. Myself and Jeff were talking about the time that Rambo went in the North Stand, albeit it was a 3-0 Watford defeat, but all those little things that certainly helps in the Premier League when it's so commercial. Those little touches like really make a difference. We got a number of questions that have been submitted via the chat and also via video. So we're going to go over a few questions. This one, guys, has been sent in from Kirk Tovey. Quite an interesting one. Have a listen to this.
Hi, Sam, and everyone else on the show. My question can be answered depending on how you view it. But my question is, before the Premier League season was suspended, was there a moment, game, managerial or club decision that you felt would have relegated us or kept us in the Premier League this season?
Who wants to start?
Well, I would like to put forward one that is the one that I think is likely to save us from relegation, which was Rambo's save against Brighton in the first half, which I watched it again recently, and I don't know how it hit him or he saved it, because it was the one part of his body that was in the way of the shot from Mopé. First half, we're 0-0 at the time. If we go 1-0 down, I think the confidence drains away and we lose that game, and that would have put us down, I think. So I'd say that potentially has saved us from relegation. And I think the one that could have possibly put a much more positive light on the whole season would have been Josh King if he'd have scored that header in the last minute against Newcastle and we'd have got away with a draw there instead of a defeat. I think that would have given us a huge amount of self-belief, because the number of games we've lost by the odd goal this season where you can sense the players don't really believe that they're going to get back into it. Yeah. Because we just don't have that same, I don't know, the same drive, it seemed, for the whole middle part of the season to think that we could do it.
The fine margins in those sort of games. I mean, that's such a good one. The Newcastle one with Josh King at the end of the game. I was going to go with the Burnley game, the one at home, that awful game. And just the fact that somehow Bournemouth managed to lose it. Obviously, it was handball, and we can go into that, and we can, talk about. I mean, you could even use the other Burnley game, of course. Just when everything's against you, it just seems like how can you catch a break? But those sort of fine margins are so important. And as Jeff was saying, when you put that into the back post, it's a different story. It's an extra point, and you're looking the other way. But yeah, the Brighton game for me, especially, just when you're looking through a game that signifies whether you can stay up or not, that was just transformational. Based on the run, I mean, it was dire, and we were all pretty concerned, I think, about the direction it was going. And for me, the one moment is Diego Rico's chance that just literally set the team alight, where he's hit the side netting. I think you guys have spoken about that before, but it was just so impactful, that one moment. You could see the change in the team. Speaking
of that Burnley game, the one at Turf Moor, obviously VAR was huge issue. What if it comes down to the fact that there's a point in it at the end of the season? You're looking back thinking, well, VAR was supposed to be sorting these problems so that we haven't got this debate at the end of the season after 38 games, but it might end up going on that game, Neil.
Yeah, well, I was going to use that example. So I think the Burnley game, had we got off to the start that we would have got off to without VAR, I think we would have gone on and won that game. And I think that was the away win we would have needed for that would have given everyone a boost in the club. I think the other moment as well, Steve Cook's wonderful goal save against Norwich is probably another moment. I think, to answer your question, every relegated side ever has looked back through a season and remembered the one or two things that, had they not happened, would have kept them up. What you forget, though, is that all the things that went in your favour. And normally, if you're relegated over 40-odd games, you're relegated for a very good reason. I think if you're going to concentrate on the positives, it is totally in our favour if we get 9 games with a fit David Brooks, Jan Juma, Lloyd Kelly as backup at left back. I think we will benefit from a break, whereas other teams might not. So I think if you're going to try and pull the positives out of it, I think that's something worth concentrating on as well.
What difference will David Brooks feasibly make? I mean, is he just going to be able to slot back in and do all the good things he did before he was injured? I mean, he's got, has he got to relearn anything, or do you honestly think he can just, play like he used to for 9 games and potentially save us?
I think we've lacked craft this season. I think there's been so many games where we've got on the edge of the box and we just haven't managed to get the ball that we wanted to get in. And David Brooks is the 100% the player that will give us craft, and instead of relying solely on pace. So I think he will. I don't think he's the kind of player that needs to get back to full fitness, because I don't think he's an all-action, all-energy player. He's a very intelligent player. So I think he will slot straight back in and look like he's never been away.
Interesting. I'll stay on with you, Neil, because Rob has come up with a question for you, which you can see on screen now. Formations. Answer that one.
So I don't know why that's come to me. I really don't. But so the answer on formation is always the same, although people always never hear me say it. It doesn't matter what formation you use, as long as A, you're good at it and you use it well, and B, you don't play the same formation week in, week out, and get teams to read you so well that they know what you're going to do. I think we had a long spell when we first came up of attacking at will and getting caught out badly. We've had 2 years now of being very defensive and trying to play on the break. in our first spell of doing that, we played really well against the bottom sides and not against the top sides. Now we're better against the top sides and not the bottom sides. To me, just mix it up and play against the top sides differently from the way play against the bottom side is the answer. So all of those formations used on the right day.
Can I say something, Neil? Because I think you're thinking like Eddie Howe thinks, and I think he's tried to mix it up this season. He hasn't played the same consistent formation. I think the problem has been that the injuries have given the players kind of a bit of confusion as to who's filling what role in those particular formations. And I think perhaps the number of new players has just made it more difficult, that they've just, again, not quite understood what the managers wanted them to play like, and not had the self-belief to actually play in it because they're not that confident. And I think he's almost overestimated the players' ability to take on board what he's saying and adapt to play 4-4-1-1 or 4-5-1 or 5-3-2 or whatever. It just hasn't kind of made sense for the players on the pitch at times, it seems to me.
It's interesting you say that, because there's been a message that's come through from Andy Jennings. This was on Twitter earlier, talking about tactics, which you see on screen. He asks us, and I'll put this to you, Neil, thoughts this season, because we've evolved from a possession heavy but little penetration, and he's given an example of West Ham away in August 2017, to rapid counters, whereas this season it hasn't been sort of either. It's been a bit of a halfway house, isn't it? Do you think that's been our downfall?
Yeah, I mean, it's a chicken and an egg situation, isn't it? Because if you have a run of good results with a formation and it's not just about the formation. I think it's the whole philosophy. Are you an attacking side or are you a defensive side that looks to attack? I think it's less about the formations. We've kind of changed our philosophy a lot, and that to me is probably the difference. What was the question again?
Let me see if I can grab it. There we go. Thoughts on tactics this season?
Yes, right.
The way that we've evolved.
Yeah, so I think so this season we've never had a run of results that's allowed us to hang our hat and stick on something. And sometimes you'll see we'll have 3 games and then it's not worked, so we change and we have another 3 games it's not worked. So we just haven't had that spell of great football that's enabled us. I think what's defined all of our seasons before is we've had 8 solid games where we've played the same team the same way, and we've won 6 of those 8 games, and that's kind of all you need to do in the Premier League. You need to do that and a little bit later on and you're fine. Because we've not had that, we've kept trying to find what the magic solution would be, and we've never really settled as a result. And yes, it has defined the season.
Interesting. Yeah, I do agree with that to some extent. Right, we've had another question as well. This is from Patrick Devitt in Chicago, and I might put this one to you, Peter. You may be able to provide us an update on a few players. So he's wondering what's going on. This is Patrick.
Hey guys, hope all is well. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying indoors. I just wanted to ask, given that since now everybody's on lockdown and the season has been postponed for now, how are the injury rehabs progressing for players like David Brooks, Lloyd Kelly, Arnaud Danjuma, Steve Cook, Charlie Daniels, etc., etc.? Let me know. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Peter.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's what we all want to know. And I think if I'm right, I think about now we'd have Chris Mepham perhaps back in training, perhaps pushing towards a first team return as well. So, yeah, I mean, if we start with just before we all went into lockdown, I think the players were going in sort of on a one-on-one basis where they'd work with a physio one-to-one at different times. It was staggered, and Charlie Daniels was going in to use the anti-gravity machine on his own. But obviously, since we've gone into lockdown, they can't really do that anymore. So from that sense, I think it would have slowed Charlie down a little bit. But for the others, it's a case of just working with FaceTime, with their physios, and just trying to tick over. I think in terms of David Brooks, I think he's pretty much there. I think the only thing for him is a case of just getting that match fitness up, but that's going to be a case for the entire squad now. So same with sort of Danjuma, Kelly. Kelly was obviously involved in the first team. Steve Cook still recovering from his hamstring injury. Not actually sure how he's doing actually at the moment, but he's just slowly progressing with that. But again, it's just that trying to find the spaces and areas in which you can actually do the exercises, do the work, do the physio work that they can't do with a physio watching them, monitoring them, the sports science monitoring them. All these elements are really, really important to recovery, which they don't have at the moment. But generally, the outlook is positive, I think, by the time we return.
if you regularly work from home, you get in a sort of mindset of thinking, right, I'm not going to watch this morning. I'm not going to do Loose Women, Tipping Point, or The Chase. I'm just going to concentrate on my laptop and do what I've got to do. These players won't be used to this at all. It's going to take a lot of self-discipline to do, all these kind of drills that Eddie Howe and co, the coaching team, are, trying to set for them. Realistically, do you think they're going to be as fit as what they left the club at, before this whole pandemic, or is it too much to expect them to stroll back in and be in the same condition?
No, there's no way that's going to happen, just because football fitness is based on football, and the actual, football fitness is unique to playing football. The types of sprints, the movements, the body movements, you can replicate that to an extent, but you can't do it without actually playing, without a ball at your feet, without having the contact, the impacts, the sprints. But I would also say, we sort of underestimate just how professional these guys are and the pressures they're under, because, 11 players will start at the weekend. The margins between being selected and not being selected, what that means for your career, for your contracts. These guys are highly motivated people. They wouldn't be where they are without that sort of same dedication. And a lot of that, especially when we're on our summer breaks, waiting for the season to come back around, these guys are working hard. They're trying to take advantage of that time to try and get ahead. It's only the odd few that we hear about that don't do that, don't put the work in. So they'll be in excellent shape. Don't get me wrong, but actual football fitness, match fitness, which is another thing entirely. We've still, got to get to that point, and they'll have to work at that, and they'll probably need a period working with Eddie.
Yeah, interesting. Got a comment from James. Beer 52 fueling you this evening. These are not Beer 52s, but they're going down very well. If you do want to do that and support the podcast, though, this is terrible, me plugging this. beer52.com/AFCB. And you can get 10 beers for the price of less than a £5 and a snack as well.
Drink responsibly, Sam.
Drink responsibly. Neil, what matches are you looking at in terms of the remaining 9 that are the must-win matches? Because there are a few. I mean, we were all looking forward to Crystal Palace, weren't we? Liverpool match didn't. I mean, it went the way that it was probably expected, but we did all right in that match, and feelings were fairly positive, I'd say, ahead of the visit of Palace, but alas, it didn't happen.
Palace, Newcastle, Southampton, 9 points, isn't it? That's the 3 games. I think in the Premier League, anything you get away from home is a bonus. At home, those 3 games were very much in our hands. I think that and a couple of draws would have been enough. And I think we would have got ourselves fired up for those 3 games. And I think we'd have picked up a shock result on the road. But I think Newcastle are very beatable. Crystal Palace, it all depends on whether we can stop Zaha, because we have games where we make him look like Ronaldo, and we have games where we make him look like the old Ronaldo playing now. But it's that's my nervousness with Crystal Palace is always Zaha. But I think Newcastle, Crystal Palace, Southampton, they were the 3. Double over Southampton, stay up.
Newcastle are always a tricky team, though, Jeff, aren't they? And as you say, they've got Matt Ritchie, who's always got something to prove.
Yeah, I agree with Neil. I think those 3 games are the sort of bankers. I would also have thrown in the Spurs without Kane and without Son were looking a shadow of the team that started the season, and I felt they were beatable. But it's going to be really interesting to see where motivation is when we all do come back, because I think we are going to be super up for that Crystal Palace game, and they effectively their season's already over. They're probably thinking about beaches and holidays now already, because what have they got left to play for? So if we can't get a result in that game, I think that will be really disappointing. The other player just on injuries that I'm not sure Peter did mention, but Phil Billing, who I never thought I would say would be an essential component to the team after the way he was playing in middle of the season. It's actually the last few games been a huge player for us. And I think if he's not fit, we are going to struggle. And Eddie might well be tempted to go with the 11 that have done so well, albeit not getting all the results the last few games, but playing much better, rather than bring people like Brooks or Kelly in. And in fact, if Kelly is playing, he'll probably get injured in the warm-up, knowing his luck.
Yeah, that's right. What was that tweet that Alex Deutsch said about Eddie Howe in 2022 or whatever, the players have like emerged from all that's going on, and I think Lloyd Kelly is a few weeks away, which is like Eddie Howe's catchphrase, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, hopefully we will, hopefully we'll sort of come out of this with a stronger side. I mean, Steve Cook obviously was a massive loss against Liverpool, and I honestly feel as though we could have got something there. But if he could come back, who knows? And as David Whitehead says on this message, Vitals Forum regular, some summer evening games at Dean Court. It would be fabulous, wouldn't it?
Well, we always struggle when it's wet and windy in Burnley, don't we? So, why not? In fact, didn't we start last season? Our start in the balmy summer of 2018 or 2019 was superb, wasn't it? So, maybe the warm weather is what we need.
But as Tommy Heffernan Poodle says, on a positive note, it's been more than a month since we moaned about VAR. And what have been your thoughts on it this season? It's the technology's there, but is it the implementation on it rather than the people using it? Because I mean, that one at Burnley specifically that I'll always look back at and think, how on earth, when you've got decisions. I mean, Peter, you've seen probably more football than most, being a journalist, you're watching football all the time, analysing stuff. What was your take on it?
The funny thing with VAR, and, we talk about it and see the Burnley game and the handballs and the shoulders, is that because the rules have changed, if the season extends, there's a possibility that the new interpretation will be then introduced, which I think it's down to each league if they want to introduce it or not, which would just be a massive kick in the teeth, wouldn't it, if they just decide to change it then. Yeah, I feel like with VAR, we've got this very strange version of it. And I've tried to stay away from all debate on it this season until it got to the point where it was just ridiculous and you just had to call it out for what it is. And it's great when it works for you and it's terrible when it's against you. I do feel the main concern I have, and it's what Eddie said when he came out after the Burnley game, it wasn't Mike Dean who made those calls that were wrong. It was the video assistant referee 300 miles away. Yeah. Now, Mike Dean's there. He can see the conditions of the game. The Adam Smith handball, the ball's swirling, it's raining, it's awful. You can clearly see it's not deliberate handball. He's gone to control it with his chest. Mike Dean's seen that 10, 15 yards away, decides it's not. Now, we don't know. We don't know if Mike Dean's turned around and then gone to, I think it was Chris Kavanagh, I'm not sure, but whoever was at Stockley Park. And just goes, actually, do you know what? I'm not sure. I didn't really see it. If you might have a better view on the screen, it's a different story. With those kind of calls, you need to use the side monitor. And I think the actual act of seeing a referee go across and using that monitor would make a big difference, not just to the supporters, but also the players, because it reinstates that sense of authority rather than this helplessness that we seem to have where we're waiting on something so far away. There's so many other problems with it, the fact that fans can't see it. Even we in the press box sometimes, we're just like, well, what's that been given? What's going on here? We're waiting, and then there's a delay, and we still don't know, and then you guys don't know, and it's not been great, but I think it's here to stay, and I think that's kind of my mindset with it, where we can talk about getting rid of it and whatever, but as a practicality, it's not probably going to happen.
Yeah, Paul said,
refined, but yeah.
Paul Kenwood said exactly the same thing. Use the pit side monitor, and that's what it's there for. And Rob, Neil, speak up against VAR. Fill your boots.
I will.
Go on, then.
I will all day long. I'll speak up against it for one reason. Yes, you can make it better, and you can. There's a lot of things that could be improved technically in it, including the use of the pitchside monitor. But I think we forget the reason why people go to football. Football is like a drug for a lot of people, and like all drugs, it involves a release, and the release is when you've had a really crap week at work, or your wife's left you, or whatever. When you go to a game and you score an 89th minute winner, like we did at Newcastle with Steve Cook's header, there's no feeling in the world like that. That's what keeps people going back to football. So no matter what you do from a technological aspect, if you take away that moment of elation, because the first thing we all do, or all did up until this season, was watch the referee to make sure he was wheeling away back to the centre line. And that feeling of elation, you can't replace that. And I think it's a danger for football if it moves away from remembering what it is, why people go, in the interest of getting things technically correct. So I think it's a disaster. I hate it for those reasons. And yes, it can be made better. But however you make it better, you will still not have taken away that moment where everyone has to now wait inside to see whether or not you can celebrate a goal. And that to me is an absolute travesty.
Yeah, and well, Rob says thank you. Go Neil, he says. Got a few other questions before we'll wrap up here. Steve Hensman says, assuming we will stay up, where do we need to strengthen and who do you fancy for these spots? Jeff, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think that we have some issues in the back four, which I think Eddie assumed that he would have sorted out buying Mepham and Lloyd Kelly. But I struggle to see how Frano can play at the peak of his game, or the peak of the game that we need him to play for many more seasons. And that right back issue, what a lot of teams have done, in fact, with our flanks this year, is they've pinged long balls over to our fullbacks to win the ball in the air against them. And I think that's exposed Adam Smith and Rico at times. So we definitely need Jack Stacey to be the regular starting right back, probably. And I'm just not sure really whether there's enough strength in depth in the current squad in that back four at the moment. I really don't, particularly with the injuries and the chances that people are going to get bookings or stupid sendings off as happened this season. I think we've been exposed several times.
Yeah, interesting. So, when we're chatting, obviously the chat on Facebook and YouTube is a little bit behind, but it comes through to us. So going back to the previous point, Neil, refute the comment that Chelsea was the best VAR moment for us. 2 minutes of pure elation when it was given. Up to you.
It's an easy answer to that.
Go on.
How many of those do you have compared to goals? So how many moments are there like Chelsea compared to routine goals through a season? So Chelsea was exciting, but you've got to counter that against the 70, 80 goals that you score in a season that you now have to wait and wonder whether or not you can get excited by them.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I take that. And also, I think we worked out that John Shark, it wasn't worked out on Twitter, that when Josh King scored a goal early this season against West Ham at home, it took 2 minutes and 2 seconds for VAR to give it. In just 20 more seconds than that, James Hayter scored 3. So it kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? I'm not so sure. I think it needs to be refined, but it seems to be that they just don't respond to the criticism, and I don't know. I'm still for it in certain ways, but it needs to be fine-tuned majorly. And we've got a few other questions that have come in as well. These are slightly random. If it does go behind closed doors, Steve Butler said, will we see them on live TV? Peter, you might be best placed to perhaps answer this, being in the media, etc. But, I mean, they would have to be, surely.
Yeah, almost certainly. Yeah, I think that's a simple one. I think for the broadcasters, they'll be keen to make up some of the losses that they've had, pausing subscriptions and things like that. So almost certainly we'll get to see them. Whether the spectacle will be the same is a different question, because, watching a game in an empty stadium, I think a lot of people don't realise just how much of an impact it is. It's part of the whole, it's the reason you buy a Sky subscription. You want to feel it, the fans there display the emotions. We're talking about VAR before with Neil and saying, it's the emotion, and that is the game. That's what sells. So, yeah, they'll have to show it, but whether it'll be the same for us, it's, it'll be different, very different. Yeah,
interesting. I'm just reading through some of the comments now just to see if here's one. Paul Camwood. Paul, cheers for tuning in. This is an interesting. I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone can really answer this, but it's just an interesting take on when do you think the club will be renewing season tickets. It's very difficult. There are so many different consequences with this whole financial issue that we're going through at the moment, isn't there?
That's a really, really good question. That I think at the moment they're paused, aren't they? So. Yeah, it just depends. The one side is they need the cash flow coming in, so that I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, I can't second guess what they're going to do in the ticket office at the club, but that's one side of the debate. The other side is, of course, we don't know what's going to happen, what tickets you're going to get, what league will be will we be in next season? So, yeah, there's plenty of different factors at stake.
And it's great to see. Yeah, go on, Neil.
Surely all the people that have been desperate to get in, though, will be queuing up to get season tickets if we get relegated.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, interesting. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what our attendances would be like, because, I mean, even during the championship, for most of the games of the championship, we didn't sell out. It was only that second half of the second season where we were selling out match after match, where promotion was really on the cards. I mean, realistically, how many, what would be the sort of attendance for a championship match against, I don't know, Rotherham or whatever? I don't even know what division they're in these days. Such a Premier League fan, aren't I? I don't even know.
You become a glory.
Yeah, I have. And you know what? That's what I never wanted to become. I thought, you know what? I will watch the EFL, but then it went on to Quest or some channel, and I just don't. I don't keep in touch with it. Terrible. But yeah, how many people do you? Well, how many seats do you think would be?
Sam, pick someone like Reading, because they're in the division.
All right. Okay. We'll go for it. I mean, for instance, a match against them, how many seats would be spare, Neil?
I think the problem that we've got is a lot of clubs, when they go up, they collect a lot of fans. So say you're like Sheffield Wednesday and you're getting 22,000 every week. Then you go up into the Premier League, you'll be selling out of 44 or whatever Hillsborough holds. When you get relegated, you keep some of those fans because they're young kids that started coming with their dads, or they've got the bug or whatever. Our problem is we weren't able to allow anyone extra to come in. So we won't get that halo effect when we go down that other clubs have got, where they keep some of the fans, like Reading did when they had their spell in the Premier League. They kept some of their fans for about 2 years before they drifted away again. We haven't got that because we couldn't let any more in.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we'll see what happens. Right, it's just approaching 9 o'clock. We said we'd do sort of no more than an hour, so I think we'll stick to that. But I just want to say, guys, thank you so much. Peter, it's been a pleasure to have you on.
No problem. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. No worries. And obviously check out The Athletic and do subscribe to check out some of Peter's articles. Jeff, I hope that you can walk down the street and people not give you a funny look with that haircut from now on.
Yeah, let's hope so. Who knows?
And Neil, have you been prepared? Have you been thinking about having a lockdown haircut, or not really that fast?
I was just wondering, do I only get half the money because I need half an hour?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, your £2.50 will be in the post. But yeah, no, really appreciate you coming on as well, mate. And obviously, it's really good input. And if you don't you visit the Vitals forum, very often I advise you do so, especially after a game as well, because I like your match reports as well. So, guys, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and thank you everyone for taking part as well, whether it's been in live chat or whether you've just been watching in the background. Really appreciate it. Remember to subscribe to the Back of the Net YouTube channel as well. And if you're listening to the podcast too, make sure you press subscribe. We'll be back next week, same time, Thursday after the Clap for Carers. But stay tuned this weekend. There's a 40-minute extended interview with Neil Meldrum, who wrote the Fall and Rise of AFC Bournemouth book. Great interview. And also a certain Mr. Matt Holland as well. So take care, guys. Wash your hands and all that. And we'll see you in the next video. Up the cherries.
Cheerio.
Back in the net!